And I also think when you're talking about unrealistic expectations, I introduced the concept in the book of a good enough digital parent. And I really want to emphasize this point because one thing that I realized when I became a parent was just how much pressure and expectations there are surrounding being a parent and a really great parent. And that extends to nutrition, but also screen time. And then there's so much guilt because inevitably we fail to live up to these crazy expectations because, first of all, they're very high expectations. And second of all, we're extremely busy, and many parents are working a job in addition to parenting. And so I introduced the concept of a good enough digital parent and try to emphasize that a good enough digital parent is going to make mistakes. They're not going to get it right the first time. And that's okay, both when it comes to their children's technology use, but also their own technology use, because it's really hard for us to find a good balance. And there's actually, what I want to emphasize is that there's opportunity and for growth and for some really great parenting to happen around this idea of good enough. And so what I mean by that is the concept itself of a good enough parent is not one that I came up with. And it actually dates back to the middle of the 20th century. There's pediatrician Donald Winnicott. And back then he was talking about the good enough mother, but I updated it for the good enough parent. But his argument, I think, is a really important one. And it actually gets back to the concept of self-regulation. If we're always there to respond to our child's every bid for attention or to fix every problem, or if they're bored, to get them unbored, they're never going to learn how to do that themselves. They're never going to learn how to be resilient. And so not always being there 100% or making some mistakes actually is an opportunity to help build your child's resilience and their ability to get themselves out of their own problems or to find something to do when they're bored. And so that extends into the digital realm. So a good enough digital parent tries out some different things, maybe figures out, you know what, if my child watches 2 hours of TV at night, I notice that their behavior starts changing. I don't feel as engaged with them. Digital parents are trying things out. They're observing and adjusting. They're making mistakes and learning from them. And in the process, hopefully helping to develop their children's resilience. And then with their own technology use, again, there's so much pressure for parents to be a good model and the best technology use possible. Show your kids that you can put your phone away. And that's, of course, we should be striving for that. But it's, again, unrealistic. These phones and computers are every bit as compelling for us as they are for kids. And so when we find ourselves slipping, that's actually a great opportunity to call attention to that and say, you know what? I'm being pulled away by this phone. And if you're, depending on how old your child is, you could even talk about the concept of dark patterns and how it's actually been designed to make me do that. And in that way, you're giving yourself a bit of a break. You're using it as an opportunity to talk to your children and as a teachable moment. And then I think the last piece of this is a good enough digital parent knows that it shouldn't all be on them to figure this out. And again, it takes more than just the parents and the kids to figure out and address these challenges. And hopefully I'm hoping that this idea will help ease the guilt somewhat of parents who are really struggling to just be the perfect paragons when it comes to screen time.
I'm breathing easier already, Katie. So thank you very much. It's not easy, right? It's not easy to model things. And I think that at least that can be a conversation around the dinner table and whatnot. We can have conversations around technology and how our own experiences with it. And yeah, I thank you. It's okay for us to make mistakes in tech use. I appreciate that because particularly with tech use, it's like, we just feel like, oh my gosh, like I've messed up my child. And it's really hard to dial it back once it's gone forward.
It's so hard. It is so hard. I've noticed that it's very hard to dial it back, but it's not impossible. And I think that's the good news. It's not irrevocable. If you feel you've gone too far in one direction, sure, it's going to be really hard to walk that back, but you can do it. It might take a little bit of time, a little bit of creativity, but it is possible.
Yeah. And dear listener, if you notice you really want some support in that, we have a great interview with Dr. Victoria Dunkley that we talked about that in an earlier episode.